International Women's Day, or known as IWD, is a global day celebrating the economic, political, and social achievements of women past, present, and future. In some countries like China, Russia, Vietnam, and Bulgaria, IWD is a national holiday. The first IWD event was run in 1911, and so 2011 sees the global centenary. Struggle is what this day signifies and what its traditions are still about. That and solidarity with women in struggle worldwide are at the heart of this very special day. On March 8, 1908, 15,000 women, garment workers, including many immigrants, marched through New York City's Lower East Side to rally at Union Square to demand economic and political rights. They honored a similar march by their forebears in 1857 on that date. Later in 1909, needle trade workers in New York City, 80% of whom were women, walked off their jobs and marched and rallied for union rights, decent wages, and working conditions. The work stoppage was reportedly referred to as the Women's Movement Strike and continued from November 22, 1909 to February 15, 1910. The Women's Trade Union League provided bail money for arrested strikers and large sums of funds during the work stoppage at this time. In 1910, an international conference of working women was held in Copenhagen. A woman called Clara Zetkin, who at that time was the leader of the Women's Office for the Social Democratic Party in Germany, tabled the idea of an International Women's Day. She proposed that every year, in every country, there should be a celebration on the same day, a Women's Day, to press further demands, and thus International Women's Day was the result. 1911. More than 1 million women and men attended International Women's Day rallies, campaigning for women's rights to work, for women's right to vote, to be trained, to hold public office, and end discrimination. However, less than a week later, on March 25th, the tragic Triangle Fire in New York City took the lives of more than 140 women working. Most of them at that time were Italian and Jewish immigrants. This disastrous event drew significant attention to working conditions and to labor legislation in the United States that became a focus for subsequent International Women's Day events. In 1929, Nellie McClung was one of the most important leaders of Canada's first wave of feminism, and she is still remembered for her role in the famous Persons case, which saw Canadian women declared persons in 1929. McClung was an instrumental figure in the fight for women's votes in Canada. In her groundbreaking mock parliament speech, McClung portrayed a world in which gender roles were reversed. She speculated on all the horrible things that would happen if men were to get to vote. In 1929, Emily Murphy, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Paulby, and Nellie McClung fought for the recognition of women persons under the British North American Act. Though Persons' case remains one of the most significant achievements, the famous five dedicated their lives to improving their communities in innumerable ways. serving to instill a spirit of strength and leadership that will be and could be drawn upon for years. 1939 through to 1945, the Second World War, saw women who worked in factories, many of whom worked in manufacturing plants that produced munitions and war supplies. Rosie the Riveter inspired a social movement that increased the number of working American women to 20 million by 1944, which was a 50% increase from 1940. Although the image of Rosie the Riveter reflected the industrial work of welders and riveters during World War II, the majority of working women filled non-factory positions in every sector of the economy. What had unified the experiences of these women was that they proved to themselves and to the country that they could do a man's job and they could do it well. 1975 was designated as International Women's Year by the United Nations. As the international feminist movement began to gain momentum during the 1970s, the General Assembly declared 1975 as the International Women's Year and organized the first Women's World Conference on Women, held in Mexico City. At the urging of the conference, it subsequently then declared the years of 1976 through to 1985 as the UN Decade for Women and established a voluntary fund for decade. The new millennium has witnessed a significant change and an attitudinal shift in both women's and society's thoughts about women's equality and emancipation. Many from a younger generation feel that all the battles have now been won for women, while many feminists from the 1970s know only too well the longevity and ingrained complexity of the patriarchy. With more women in the boardroom and greater equality in legislative rights and an increased critical mass of women's visibility as impressive role models in everyday aspect of life, one could think that women have gained that true equality. The unfortunate fact is that women are still not paid equally to that of their male counterparts. Women are still not present in equal numbers in business or in politics. And globally, women's education, health, and the violence against them is worse than that of men. 2010 brought us to the G20 march here in Toronto. Women with a giant coat hanger led that march, drawing attention to the international need to fund women's reproductive rights. 2011, CAW Director of our women's programs, Julie White, and Education Department staff, Kim Yardy, attended the 55th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. The session took place at the UN headquarters in New York City from February 22nd to just last week, March 4th. All of these actions are our commitment as a union toward full social and legal equality for all women worldwide. Today, we do have female astronauts, and we do have some female prime ministers. Schoolgirls are welcomed into universities. Women can work and have a family. Women can have real choices. And so the tone and nature of International Women's Day has, for the past few years, moved from being a reminder about the negatives to a celebration of the positives. One of my favorite quotes I'd like to leave you with is from Nellie McClung, and it is, "Women are going to form a chain, a greater sisterhood than the world has ever known." I encourage you all to participate in your Women's Day events in the communities you come from, and happy International Women's Day, everyone.